Star Wars is a franchise that is extremely popular and very close to my heart. I have been a fan for years. Born in 1982, I was brought up, once old enough, to appreciate the ways of the Force. With the movies came toys, magazines, comics, books, collector's cards, and more importantly video games. I grew up playing some of the finest and also some of the worst Star Wars-based video games. All experiences have made me come to one final conclusion and truth. The more the merrier. Due to the extensive lore of the Star Wars universe, there have been many areas in which video games, as well as comics etc., have been able to draw. One of my first experiences of Star Wars in the respect of video games was Super Star Wars on the SNES, 1992. This was a great game which helped recreate the experience of the movie. Along came Super The Empire Strikes Back, 1993 and Super Return of the Jedi, 1994. These games performed exactly as they were supposed to, recreating the movie experience. It wouldn't be until much later on that Star Wars video games would break away from the mold and create something that was completely original and unique. After the Super Star Wars games that I loved dearly, I was on the lookout for my next Star Wars fix. X-Wing, 1993 and the subsequent TIE Fighter game 1 year later in 1994 were the games I needed to quench my need for Star Wars-based video games. However, it wasn't until X-Wing vs TIE Fighter in 1997 that I really took a real interest. This space combat game was fantastic, essentially a game with very little or no story. It was pure Star Wars action at its finest. I implore anyone who has not played this to get it going. A quick check online revealed that it is available through the Steam platform for a very reasonable and worthwhile price. Steam sale, keep those ears to the ground. The next game that took my interest was another PC title called Rebel Assault. Music straight from the movies, multimedia video, stereo music etc. This completely sucked me in and is like X-Wing vs TIE Fighter, a very worthwhile Steam purchase if available. The one game in the series of Star Wars video games that made the biggest impact upon me is and always will be Dark Forces. This was a first-person shooter where you take over duties as Kyle Katarn, tasked with discovering the Empire's secret plan to develop battle droids and power-armored stormtroopers. This game, at the time, ticked all the Star Wars boxes for me. Music, check. Graphics, check. They are shockingly bad now, haha. Story, check. Weapons and sounds, check. It was just a great game. It genuinely made me feel like I was within the Star Wars universe, and this was the first time I had felt this way. With previous titles it recreated the movies for me, but with this game, I was in charge, I made the decisions, I blasted the stormtroopers, I blew up the bases. I was not reliving anything as the story was completely new. This spelled out to me that this was the way forward for Star Wars video games. This was the type of game I enjoyed. Yes, a recreation is nice, but it doesn't fully engage you like a well-written and executed story that's brand new. 1997 saw the sequel to my favorite Star Wars game, Star Wars Jedi Knight, Dark Forces 2. This game did not disappoint even if my PC's graphics card at the time did. A few months passed and a new family PC was purchased. I did not hesitate to make good use of it. Much like its predecessor, the story, music, atmosphere, lore, and action were all prevalent. Currently sitting pretty with an 89 Metacritic score and 8.6 user score, I'd say my opinion is validated to a huge degree. This game, albeit not for everyone, is fucking awesome. Even to this day it holds up to a degree in my opinion. One full year later in 1998 I sampled another Star Wars game, albeit on console. Rogue Squadron was on the Nintendo 64. This game got me back into the Star Wars video games arena after my obsession with Dark Forces 2. Rogue Squadron put Luke Skywalker in the driving seat for most of the missions and was very much a nod to the X-Wing and TIE Fighter games, but with better graphical resolution and the ease and convenience of a console. A very enjoyable game, but nothing earth-shattering. The ear-shattering game was still to come. Between 1998 and the release of a game I will mention shortly, there were a number of mentionable standalone titles that drew me back into the universe. Star Wars Masters of Teräs Käsi was a venture into the beat-em-up genre, and a very enjoyable one at that. As always, not for everyone, but in my estimation, a very good stab at the genre and an enjoyable and unique game. Star Wars Bounty Hunter 2002 was another game I enjoyed. You play as the cult character Jango Fett and to a degree plays as a prequel to the movie Star Wars, Episode II: Attack of the Clones. Jango's task during the game is to find and defeat Dark Jedi Komari Voza. Upon defeating him, you are chosen as the avatar and template for the clone army. 2003 was upon us and a glitch in the Matrix was about to occur. Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic was released. This game, in my opinion, is a love letter by its creators to the whole Star Wars universe. They took the feeling and idea of what Star Wars encapsulates and makes you the main protagonist. It, put simply, is one of the greatest gaming experiences I have had to date. The graphics were great, the music was on point, but it was the story and level of choice that truly allowed it to develop on its own. A true masterpiece, and is actually, as I write, making me a little emotional thinking back on the experience I had with this game. I cannot recommend this game enough, and if you have a spare few weeks with nothing else to do, I implore you to shut yourself away and dump a good few 8 to 10 hour sessions into this game. You will not be disappointed. 2004, 2005, 2006 and 2008 were further fruitful years for the Star Wars franchise. The release of Star Wars: Battlefront in 2004 and Star Wars: Battlefront 2 in 2005 made for excellent Star Wars gaming experiences, both of which still live in my memory as some of the best gaming experiences in the Star Wars universe I have had. 2006 was Empire at War. The Star Wars universe descended upon the Command and Conquer genre and did not disappoint. 2008 handed us Star Wars: The Force Unleashed, a very polished and graphically excellent game. You play as Starkiller, an apprentice of Darth Vader who turns to the light side of the Force. It spawned a short but fairly enjoyable sequel very originally named The Force Unleashed 2. It may be troubling some of the slightly older generation that I have not yet mentioned the main reason for these absolutely fantastic trips into the universe that we all enjoy so much. LucasArts are that reason. They were responsible for all game development whilst under George Lucas's reign, and yes, they hit the post, the bar, and even well wide on some occasions, but when they scored, boy did they score big. LucasArts had the autonomy to ship game development to other companies and still had a measure of control. This clearly didn't work all the time, but my main point is that it did work. LucasArts have been responsible, along with developers, for some fantastic and genuinely emotional gaming experiences. I for one was devastated when I heard George Lucas was selling that arm of the franchise to Disney, as I had real worries that they would dump the IP onto the highest bidder. I hate to admit that my gut reaction came true, but, to date, the franchise rights for Star Wars video games have fallen to EA. They have fallen drastically short of the experience I expect coming from the Star Wars universe. I can completely understand why Disney gave them a deal for the creation of Star Wars games. EA is a monster in terms of size. $51 billion is a pretty big corporation, so they must be doing something right. To anyone other than a gamer, you would probably say yes. Gamers, in my opinion, have a unique viewpoint in terms of this acquisition. EA are well known as a sports franchise developer. NBA, FIFA, NFL, and NHL, you name the sport, they have it covered. Sure, they have purchased smaller companies like Respawn for their IP and BioWare, but essentially they are known for pumping out slightly upgraded versions of the same games. FIFA 17 is not a huge upgrade from FIFA 15. In addition to this, with these sports franchise game, they have utilized microtransactions very intelligently. This has somewhat backfired recently, and that's what I would like to touch on in now. Player packs, character customizations, etc. have become commonplace in the sports games. Gamers are used to purchasing these items and as such, in my opinion, have been desensitized to their actual value and real purpose. I come from a period in time where you pay full price for a game and get the full game. Some may say I'm not living in the real world, but I have no issue with paying for DLC when there is actual new content. I take issue with items that have already been developed that are then packaged away into bundles just to increase the top line of the parent company. This is despicable in my mind and in no way has the consumer in mind. There is simply no plan to make an amazing, groundbreaking game if you plan to chop it into bits and sell it in pieces over time. LucasArts never pulled this kind of misdirection, and it genuinely makes me worried for the younger gamers who don't have the maturity to realize what's going on. EA subcontracted DICE, a fantastic gaming company with a great pedigree for making first-person shooters. In the fallout from hearing the news of the acquisition of the Star Wars license and DICE's subsequent involvement, I was very positive in my expectations to what they could achieve. I played the Battlefront beta and enjoyed it. I felt they had captured some of what I had really enjoyed in the past. It clearly wasn't finished and didn't give enough of a flavor of what the full experience would be, but I was definitely happy with what I saw. The game released to what I can only describe as a complete letdown. The game simply did not have enough modes or even game content to actually comprise a game. It essentially was a multiplayer game, and not a very good one at that. No story mode included, and essentially suffered from that in my opinion. It did have one saving grace for anyone who owned a PSVR. The X-Wing experience was simply joyous, but in fact was created by Criterion from COD fame and not DICE. Upon the acquisition of the Star Wars gaming license from Disney, DICE haven't really produced a whole lot. I haven't mentioned the disaster that was Battlefront 2. The microtransactions are so drastically misplaced that by reports Disney got involved and managed to suspend these transactions until they could be ironed out. This was a disaster for EA, and no matter what they say through press releases, it did hurt the sales of this game. Disney are not blameless here, as they should have had a tighter grip of the reins after the poor reception of Star Wars Battlefront. Who knows, they maybe did get involved, we will never know. It sure seems like they got involved with Battlefront 2 due to many reports online. I have one piece of advice to Disney, and that is get the license back from EA, listen to pitches from individual game companies and pick the most exciting prospects. Give them autonomy, within reason, and don't put pressure the company to include microtransactions. I'm not for 1 second saying this will make Star Wars games completely flawless and impervious to criticism, but it will at least enable, like back in the golden era of LucasArts, the creation of numerous Star Wars games. LucasArts are responsible for some of the best Star Wars games out there. If we are being truly honest, you could even say some of the best video games the industry has to offer. Why not try out their model again? For me, outside looking in, it worked. My final thoughts: Star Wars was once a great gaming franchise and has so much potential and emotion to mine that more companies should be involved in the creation of the games. Please Disney, this is a plea, get the license back from EA and give companies the right to really create something wonderful. I genuinely think the industry will respond to your show of strength in terms of changing something when it isn't working. I sure would. Many thanks to everyone who has tuned in. Looks like we got a little further down the rabbit hole. Phantom Lord.